mentions, the genealogy goes, John Hyrcanus, and then Alexander Onias. By this time they're having two names, Greek and Hebrew. Onias is Jonathan. So John Hyrcanus, John is a Hebrew name, whether you know or not, it's Yochanan, and the H is kept in the Hebrew as we. So Simon would be around, I suppose 140 BC, or somewhere in there he would die. John Hyrcanus is maybe down to 110 BC. Alexander Onias takes it down to 70 BC. So I ran ahead there quickly. I ran ahead quickly in order to, make you feel at the break that you could get a clearer idea of where we're moving here. What I'm trying to show you is the sectarian situation in Palestine, or Israel, or Eretz Israel, or the Holy Land, however you want to call this place, is more complicated than most people think. And it's not just so easy to say Pharisees, Sadducees. Everyone's heard of the Pharisees and Sadducees. I sort of tempted to say because they've seen Mel Gibson's movie or something, but because they've heard of it from the Gospels, the New Testament, and so on. The Essenes are not mentioned in the New Testament. Why aren't they mentioned in the New Testament? I might have mentioned it last time to you. Well, I think that they're not mentioned in the New Testament because the party that is really the Jesus party are the Essenes. I mean, you don't mention the group that you really are yourselves or are descended from. Now, we haven't even mentioned Essenes yet because they haven't appeared yet on our radar scope. But we've heard about Essenes because we've heard about the Dead Sea Scrolls, and we know that everyone talks about the Essenes being the people who are responsible for the Dead Sea Scrolls. But I have tried to, from the beginning, make a caveat there. Before you say the Essenes are the people who wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls, you have to say, I don't have a preconception of what Essenes are. I can't try to make the scrolls fit my preconception of Essenes. I have to, if I say Essenes wrote the scrolls, then I have to judge Essenes, what Essenes are, by what the scrolls are, not vice versa. Scrolls have an idea of resurrection of the dead. But the scrolls also have an idea of final apocalyptic war against all evil on the earth. And the scrolls are very, very politicized and extremely militant. So most people's idea of Essenes are a retiring, peaceful group in the wilderness, sort of like a monastic group. That's how the original scholars who presented them tried to portray them. Because many of the original scholars who were in the Jordan area after the partition of Palestine, where the scrolls had come in from, what we now call the West Bank, or the area after partition, where there were walls in the middle of Jerusalem. Most of those people who were able to deal with the scrolls from 48 to the 67 war, for those 20 years, were basically mostly Christian monks. I don't even say nuns. I never heard any nuns who were involved, but mostly monks. And they saw the Essenes like they saw themselves. Monkish sort of, I'm not sure how violent Christian monks are or aren't, but non-violent and so on, retiring supposedly and so on. But that's not the Essenes of the scroll. And that's not this movement we're seeing in the Judas Maccabee period either. These people are much more aggressive than that. This fellow who throws his guts into the crowd, that's not a retiring monk. That's someone who believes in the law and is willing to go to the nth degree to sacrifice himself if that's what it takes. Not that he's aggressive in the sense that he's going to be on the offensive and not the defensive, but defensive he will go to the last degree. So we're building the context for the scrolls here. Let's then finish it up by looking at Josephus chapter 1. Now before I look at chapter 1, it's always useful to look at prefaces. You look at the preface, we all have different copies of Josephus because we couldn't all get the same copy. I'll follow my Penguin Jewish War. You follow whichever one, and if there's a difference between what you have and I have, if it's a substantial difference, bring it up. If it's just a matter of, you know, people, as I told you before, have to have different translations or they'll be sued. You can't steal someone else's translation and then republish it as yours. So you have to have different words and use different sentence structure and everything. So they're going to be different. Here's this one says, the war of the Jews against the Romans was the greatest of our time. Greater too, perhaps, this is the preface, than any recorded struggle, whether between cities or nations. Okay. Right away we know that Josephus is what? An exaggerator. It wasn't the greatest struggle, probably. It was a serious struggle. It was not the greatest recorded struggle between cities and nations, probably. It was a nasty little struggle. Went on for quite a long time. But why does he want to build it up big? Well, because for him it is big, because it's everything that he stood for he lost, and everything that he became he owed to it. But also, he says at one point, people who have small, minor enemies can't show their greatness. To show your greatness, you have to have great enemies. So to praise Titus and Vespasian, and I don't have to keep writing them on the board, you know who these people are now, who are the ultimate object of this book, to ingratiate himself and to get their favor. The Jews, the war has to be a big thing. It has to be as big as Julius Caesar's Gallic War, Julius Caesar's Civil War. He's building these people up as the new emperors after Julius Caesar. So the Jewish War has to be a big thing. You see, that's the funny thing. They called it the Jewish War because these are Roman wars fought against people. Gallic War, Romans fighting the Gauls in France, and so on. So it isn't a Jewish war because it's written from a Jewish perspective. It's actually written against the Jews, finally, in order to praise the Romans, particularly the Roman emperors, to be. In any case, listen to what he says next. Yet persons with no first-hand knowledge, accepting baseless and inconsistent stories on hearsay, have written garbled accounts, while those of eyewitnesses have been falsified, either to flatter the Romans or vilify the Jews. Now, that's already in his time, 3 years after the war occurred.